Jon Manning is the head of pricing at a SaaS tech company, the founder of Pricing Profits, a startup mentor, a micro and behavioural economist, and the author of Overcoming Floccinaucinihilipilification, Valuing and Monetizing Products and Services, as Jon calls it, the most ridiculously titled pricing book that guides startups, entrepreneurs, and side hustlers through value-based pricing. Jon, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I should start also by thanking you for being wonderful in a mentoring session for me with the Giants program through Blackbird. You gave me some incredible insights into pricing. And then I read your book.
Nice to hear. Good,
yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Can you tell us what prompted you to write your book?
I think there was 3 things. Number 1, it was a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
Number 2, I started to get asked to help startups with their pricing when they were going through accelerators and the like. And thirdly, it was a mental health thing. So I finished the book during COVID lockdowns, and it took my mind off that that terrible time in Melbourne where we went through 6 years felt like 6 lockdowns.
Yeah, that 9 months continuous, the longest continuous lockdown in the world.
Yeah.
Really terrible.
Yeah.
No, that's there's been many books born from COVID. If there's a silver lining, I think that would be it. Can you tell us about your publishing journey?
Well, I started off with a ghostwriter. I actually started before the pandemic. And to be honest, that really wasn't working out for me. So in some ways, I used the pandemic to say, hey, thanks, but this just isn't working. I then finished writing the book myself, or to put it more correctly, I got it to the point where I thought I'd finished writing the book. But then I sort of quickly discovered I needed both a designer for the graphics and the cover. And then I engaged an editor / proofreader / someone who could get the formatting right for me, because I went self-published through Ingram Spark.
Yep. Okay. And can you just tell us with the ghostwriter, did you feel that the ghostwriter wasn't capturing your voice?
Precisely. In fact, it was probably even more so that I felt that person was starting to write what they wanted to write rather than in my voice what I wanted written.
Gee. Okay. No, that's not going to work. That's not going to work.
No.
Where does a person look for ghostwriters?
Google.
Is that what you do?
I can't remember how I
okay.
I did.
It wasn't Reedsy or something like that.
I was looking at Reedsy at the time, but I don't think there was a connection between the ghostwriter that I started utilizing and what I found on Reedsy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For someone who's watching this and they're thinking of embarking on something similar, are there any key lessons that you could share?
I think my key lessons are that it's only people like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling who make millions of dollars writing books, so don't do it for the money. Yeah. Self-publish, and you do it on your terms and on your deadlines. But from what I hear, if you go via a publisher, then you're working to their terms and their deadlines. And own it. Do it yourself. Write it yourself and get the editor, proofread it and check it. And I guess when I started doing what I was doing, getting a ghostwriter, and then I actually ended up playing the editor, so the roles were reversed. So just own it from the start.
Did you originally think, okay, I'm going to get a ghostwriter because I'm short of time and don't have confidence in writing, or one of those things?
No, it was more I was busy. I've got this vision, delegate it.
Okay. Yeah. But it is so personal, writing a book, and it needs, well, if it's a great ghostwriter, then there's just no issue. It's a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
How did you come to specialize in the area of pricing, which is such a big issue for creatives, self-employed people starting out with their businesses?
You can go on there if you could. It's even efficient
Everybody.
for corporates, actually. So I don't think anybody finishes school and university and goes, hey, I want to work in pricing. In fact, in Australia, you'd be lucky to find a university that offers a module in pricing, never mind an entire degree. The first job I did when I left school was checking prices on invoices at a company in the oil industry and wondering where those prices came from. And I think the oil industry is still trying to work out where those prices came from. But after that, I then got an opportunity to work with airline in an airline with pricing. And I originally started pricing catering or meals that airlines were picking up from flight kitchens. And from there, I moved into airfares. And it was another different methodology again. So it'd gone from the mysterious world of oil industry pricing to cost plus pricing, working out how much a peanut cost or how much a slice of bread cost and stuff like that, to the world of dynamic pricing driven by demand and supply with the pricing of airfares. And from there, I've just gone on to price products and services across about 130 different companies. And these days, it's more about value-based pricing. So, what's the value of it that I deliver to a customer with my product and services, and how do I monetize on the basis of value rather than just adding up costs? And if you reflect back on what's happened over the last 2 years, if you're doing that, your prices would have gone through the roof, as they have for many companies with the the trends we've seen with inflation.
So just to be really clear, what's the difference between cost-based pricing and value-based pricing?
Well, cost-based pricing is where you add up, the cost of manufacturing if you're producing a good, or you might attach a dollar value to an hour of work you do in a service, and you work out how many hours you're going to do or how many widgets you're going to produce, and you throw on a margin on top of that and cross your fingers and hope the customer's willing to pay for it. With a value-based approach, you might actually look at one of three sources of economic value that you might provide. So in B2B markets, there are three ways to provide economic value. You can increase a customer's revenue, you can reduce their costs, or you can minimize their risk. If you can quantify how much you increase revenue or reduce costs, then you can charge on the basis of that revenue generated or the cost saved, whether it's I just charge you 10% of the cost savings, or I charge you 5% of your revenue uplift, something like that. It's a conversation that is aligned to the value that the customer is going to get from their from buying from you, rather than costs. And then the other thing is that if I say to you, Jess, hey, which telco are you with? And let's assume none of them are listening, but one of them, you might say, I'm with telco A, and I say to you, why are you with telco A? You are not going to tell me you're with telco A because you like their cost base. No one will ever say, I buy from this company because I love their cost base. They will say, I buy from this telco because they've got really good network coverage or something like that. And that's value rather than the cost base.
I see. Yeah. If you're an SME owner, why is it actually a good thing if some potential customers complain that your products or services are too expensive for them?
Customers will rarely, if ever, tell you you're too cheap. But they will sometimes tell you they really love your product or service, and they're worried you're too cheap, that you won't be sticking around for long enough. But generally, they will not tell you you're too cheap. So if you get silence from customers, you're probably too cheap. You always want one or two customers complaining about price. If every customer is complaining about price, then you're too heavy, too expensive. But one or two is just what you want.
So what are some telltale signs that your goods or services are underpriced?
You're not getting that feedback from customers, would be for a start. If you're selling a physical good and you're running short on inventory, you've probably got customers stocking up. Because with goods you can inventory them, you can, fill up your pantry. Costco's a great example of that. You could go and buy a 44-gallon drum of ranch sauce from Costco and use it over an extended period of time. For service providers, it's customers coming back to you again. And when you look around with people selling products digitally and so forth, there's some metrics that come out of online e-commerce and so forth. So something like a look to book ratio. So how many customers are looking at your product to booking it or selling it?
Mhm.
If that number's really high, then you're probably, too cheap. You want to get your look to book or your look to sell ratio down a bit.
And you want to look at what your rivals are doing, don't you?
Yes, but you do. It's helpful to know what your competitors are charging. It's also helpful to know how you are different from your customers, but you don't want to outsource your pricing to the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Why do you think that pricing makes us uncomfortable and that many people just struggle with it and are likely to undercharge for their services?
I think there's three things. The first is confidence. People lack the confidence to charge what their products and services are worth, and that might be because they never stop to think about what their products are worth.
Mm.
The second thing is awareness, and I think awareness is a multifaceted thing. It's awareness of how to price. It's awareness of pricing methodologies. What else is there besides what the competitor charges? We've already talked about cost plus pricing. We've talked about value-based pricing. We've talked about dynamic-based pricing in a demand and supply-driven context. There are other options out there. And there's also a lack of awareness of specialists who can help them with pricing. Like, people don't know that people like me exist. And then the third thing I think is uncertainty. So that uncertainty around what value they provide and how to measure that value. How do you work out increasing revenue, reducing costs, minimizing risks?
Yeah, that is really tricky to work out. Yeah. So let's turn now to the title of your book. You've got your book there that you can show us?
My book is there.
And can you pronounce the title for me?
Overcoming Floccinaucinihilipilification. It is the longest F word, or it's the longest word in the English language, and it means the habit of estimating something as valueless. And the reason I chose, I knew about the word for a long time, but when I started working with startups and entrepreneurs and so forth, I would ask them, well, what's your monetization model? And 9 times out of 10, people will say, I'm not worried about that just yet. We haven't got anything to monetize. We're just going to get Twitter followers, Facebook likes, YouTube subscribers, and we'll worry about that later. And that to me was Floccinaucinihilipilification. They just were always in the habit of estimating that what they had built was valueless. Fortunately, I think if you fast forward 10, 15 years ago to today, that number is in reverse. There's probably only 1 in 10 that are going after the Twitter followers or the X followers, the Facebook likes and stuff like that. And 9 out of 10 are going, you know what? I'm providing value from day one here. I'm going to start charging from day one.
I see. Okay. So were there any practical considerations around choosing such a long word, including how the cover was designed? I love the cover tag, how the word goes around the cover.
I had one person say to me, that is the most stupid title in the book I've ever heard of for a book. You need to change it. It was one out of many, so I didn't heed the advice. And I've done that before. There are things that I've done where I think I'm going to do this because I don't want to die not knowing what would have happened if I'd done it.
Yeah.
And since as you've said and as I've said, I now just commonly refer to it as the most ridiculously titled pricing book that's ever been published. Interestingly, in preparation for this conversation yesterday, I jumped onto Amazon, and there are 2 other books that have Floccinaucinihilipilification in the title. And there is a band called Floccinaucinihilipilification, whose MP3s you can buy on Amazon, and you can also listen to them on Spotify. And they have an average of 43 listeners per month. So it is obviously not a commonly used word, but one even if you can't pronounce it, once you understand the meaning of it, it's highly applicable to the book I've written.
Yes, yes, it certainly is. It's 29 letters long, I think.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. But if someone wants to ask you about your book, if they don't know how to say the word, do they sort of dance around it?
Yeah, they usually say, "Oh, can you just, that book you've written, could you just pronounce it?" Yeah.
Would you name it the same again?
I don't have a reason not to. In fact, I'm toying with the idea of a second edition. Would I change the name of the book for the second edition? And I don't know whether that's a thing, but I probably wouldn't.
If you wrote a second edition, you mean updated the content or a part two?
I would. Well, it's got two parts in the book at the moment. I'm at the second edition might feature a third part of the book.
Like new material?
Yes, yeah.
So, well, you'd want a new title then so that they stand apart because they're two distinct books.
Well, it would build on the first and second parts. Is it a Home Alone 2 type question?
Well, that could be more confusing. You have two books called Floccinaucinihilipilification. Has there been, apart from the person who said, "Oh, that's so ridiculous," has there been any other memorable reactions to it?
I think I'm not alone in saying a lot of people like to send authors photos of them having purchased your book and reading it. So I've had photos from people I know in various parts of the world who, here I am reading your book in Washington, or here I am reading your book in San Diego. So that's been really appreciated. And I did have a phone call from a message left on my voicemail one day, and this voice said, "I want to talk to Jon Manning. Please, Jon Manning, ring me back, please. I don't want anyone else to ring me back, just Jon Manning." And I rang this person back, and he was the CEO of a property company, and he had purchased 8 copies of the book to give to all his direct reports.
Terrific.
So yeah, that was
and he was calling to say, "I enjoyed your book."
No, he was calling to say, "Come in and do some work with me."
Terrific.
Yeah.
So has it generated great leads?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So 100% that is worthwhile. It's not the royalties of the book. It is the business leads that the book can generate.
And the ability to say you're a published author.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, it does create credibility and so forth. If you ask me how many copies of my book I've sold, I'm glad that wasn't on the run sheet, because I got no idea. And there's some dollars that dribble into my bank account every month or every quarter or something like that. It's not really about that for me though. It's it's that bucket list thing and the credibility and the expert status that accrues from
writing a book.
Yeah,
nothing compares to that.
Yeah.
And I think, a book title it's not copyright, because often clients say, "Oh no, I thought up this title and I've just found there's another book on Amazon with the same name." And I say, don't worry, you can have the same title, and because the subtitle will be different, your name will be different. You can't have Animal Farm. Amazon will take down your account if you try to do that. But it's part of your professional brand, and choosing a memorable title, I'm sure you're a memorable person in business, right? It's cohesive in that way.
I didn't realize that copyright situation until you sent me through the questions that we were going to discuss today. I think the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges I've had, is where in online forums here, there, and everywhere I've been asked to, give some information about yourself. I'm worried that there's too many characters, there's too many letters in the title of the book, that it's not going to fit in the space in the field. That's probably my biggest concern.
No, because you can have a long title. You can have a title with 5 or 6 words together.
But there are other sites, where you might want to say that you've published a book called this and so forth, and it says it stops at FLOCC, not enough character space.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I didn't realize the copyright is there, and that's why I dived in yesterday to look at what else was published using that word, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It's a big ugly word that nobody wants to use. So,
but if you're brave enough to use it, then no one will forget. Like your book is just it's so memorable for the title that becomes a point of interest, and then the person is curious and they pick up the book. You've got to get the person to pick up the book when there's a whole pile of books on the table. So you can do that in different ways.
Yep.
Would your advice be to authors not to play it safe with a book title, not to choose something that's like been done 1,000 times before, to find something memorable?
I think I would do it all over again, absolutely. And if it's not offending anyone, absolutely go for it.
Yeah. Books are creative things. Did you enjoy writing it? Do you enjoy writing?
Yeah, I did. It obviously took longer. I think it would. I enjoyed the process once I really got into it, and particularly when I could see the end, when I could, see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
It took a few iterations with, designers, and I think I had about 3 preliminary release dates before the actual release date, which was just associated with formatting the ebook and stuff like that.
A bit stressful. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't too stressful. I knew the person who was doing the work for me, had everything under control and stuff like that.
But
because the other thing was, it was all done by distance because everyone was in lockdown. So that the editor and the proofreader was up in Cairns.
Yep. But with your release dates, like if you don't, you said you did it with Ingram, but with Amazon, if you push back the date more than once, they bar you for a year.
Right.
So you've got to commit. If you say it's going to be published on this date, then you have to do that. So, but yeah, it can be very fragmented. Hence why I set up the business, so that you don't have to go to all these different service providers to make a book. So.
And that's the beauty of Ingram Spark, because I've got my books on websites in Sweden and Portugal.
It's amazing. 40,000 retailers.
Yeah.
Really amazing. Is there an audiobook?
No.
Any plans?
Never thought about it.
Should do it. I know someone who can help you do it. It's a very fast-growing category.
Yeah, it's something for the bucket list.
Something for the bucket list. Narrate your own book. Yeah. All right. Jon, thank you for coming on and talking to us about pricing and your very memorably titled book.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.